Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So I'm going to start with a business card up here, circled. This is somebody's business card, best designers. Look at the mistake. Dezinger, graphic dezinger, right? All right, how about this? What's wrong with this picture? That's the first one on the left, top left corner. I'm a Martian? Belief makes things real? My mum is my angle? Only God can fudge me. What? Or how about this one? Don't let the past make your decisions, DICISIONS, and your for today. For today? What? Oh my gosh. All right. Entrepreneurs need to sweat the details. Here's a grocery store. A couple of things. I like this one. Shoplifters will be prostituted, no exceptions. And how about pastrami on a beagle? Comes with lettuce and the beagle. Oh, a good deal for $3.89. So mistakes like this happen all the time. Oh, I got one more. This is a real business card. I got handed to me a few years ago. Can anybody, does everybody have microphones on? I don't know if you do or not. Can anybody tell me what's wrong with this business card?
You guys are free to unmute.
No?
Supposed to be bumper to bumper?
Yeah, bumper to bumper. So they handed that card out. It was a generic card, just a general card, business card. It's a real business. Bumper to bumper. And they put bummer to bummer. I don't know. So I did point it out to the fella and he got a little embarrassed. And he said, I did that on purpose. I said, no, you didn't. For $15, you might want to reprint those. Anyway, the details matter. You know, it's our job as entrepreneurs to sweat the details. All right, my background very, very quickly. I'm a retired senior lecturer, executive in residence from the University of Baltimore. I'm now adjunct faculty there. As Delise mentioned, I'm the faculty advisor for CCBC's Elite 10 program. I have a funny accent. I have 45 years of B2B experience, but 20 of that was in Canada. So some of the outs and the bouts will come out as I get talking here. And 25 years in the US. I have an engineering background. And I've been an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur. For those that don't know what an intrapreneur is somebody that launches a business within a business. And I was at University of Baltimore since 2008, full-time from 2011 to 2023. So that's enough about me. All right. I also run a business called SalesBrewers. It's a sales and marketing consulting company. And our tagline is, we don't make beer, we make the perfect sales brew. All right. So, good way to start this is to think that entrepreneurs focus on problems, not products. So we need to understand what our prospective customers' pain is and find a solution for the pain. That's what makes us a good entrepreneur. All right. Anybody know who Bob Parsons is? Anybody? Ever heard of this guy? Okay. Anybody know who GoDaddy.com is? Bob Parsons is the founder and CEO of GoDaddy.com. He is Dr. Bob because he's actually a University of Baltimore alum. He got a BA in accounting in 1975, an honorary doctorate in 2008. When you give enough money to your alma mater, we'll give you a free doctorate. In 1982, he founded a company called Parsons Technology, which many people haven't heard of. He started by selling accounting software. He was an accountant, and this is before Excel, and there was no software for keeping spreadsheets. It was all done on manual paper, and he said my handwriting wasn't good enough to be an accountant, and that's what his degree was in. So he started using personal computers, the Tandy computers and really early microcomputers, and loaded the software on. And Parsons eventually became a company that just put software on various mediums. And he sold that company to another software company in 1994 for $64 million. And he was only in his 50s. And he started GoDaddy.com in 1997. And the reason for that is the internet was just coming to fruition, and it was incredibly difficult to build a website. There was no easy way to do it. He still owns 28% of GoDaddy.com, which he's So he sold the majority of the company at this point. And his personal wealth as of April this year is $4.1 billion. Not bad from a boy from Baltimore, right? Grew up in Baltimore. All right. So Bob has 10 reasons here why it's a good idea to start a company. Number one, you get to do what you love, right? You're doing this because you're passionate about solving problems for various customers. You can work whenever you want. Now, the reality is you're probably going to work more than you would at a regular job because you're starting your business, but you get to call when. If you want to work at 2 a.m, knock yourself out. You get to determine who you work with. Hey, you get to pick and choose your employees. And probably early on, it's going to be me, myself, and I, right? Because you can't afford to hire anybody, but eventually you will. You control your destiny. There's nobody else telling you how you're going to be successful. You do that on your own accord. You can be as creative as you want to be. You will develop skills. Some skills, maybe you're not so keen on developing. I had a friend that started a pizza business for all the wrong reasons. He was an accountant. He lost his corporate job and he said, I like pizza. I'm going to start a pizzeria. And in the first week, he got to learn how to do plumbing because the toilet backed up and flooded his kitchen. So that was a skill he didn't think he ever was going to have to learn, but he did. There is the opportunity for more money, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And of course, there's excitement. So whether you're going to make your payroll or not, that can be exciting, right? How am I going to pay the bills this month? That's still exciting. It may not be good exciting, but it's still exciting. You're living your dream. You're doing what you want to do. You're going after and chasing your personal goals. All right. So there's 3 main reasons people become entrepreneurs. And the first one is you want to be your own boss. You want to do your own thing. Desire to pursue your own ideas, whatever that happens to be. Maybe you were working for a company, you went to your boss with an idea and he just poo-pooed it and said, no, we're not doing that. Doesn't fit our corporate model. So you go out on your own to chase it. And ideally, there's financial rewards. I mean, that's not your number one motivator, but we'll touch on that again in a second, but money opportunity certainly is there. There's no limit to how much you can make. All right. The 4 characteristics, though, of somebody that makes a good entrepreneur are these, and they're not in any particular order. So I'm going to start with, you've got a passion for whatever you're doing, whether it was a hobby that you're now going to turn into some sort of business to make you money. Maybe you love baking and you want to bring it to the public. Great. Your product and very customer focus. You want to satisfy the needs of the customer. You're going to create a product to do that. You have execution intelligence. What that basically means, you have the ability to get stuff done. And I'm sure I have had relatives who are sitting around the Thanksgiving table, and old Bob every year comes back and says, I got this wonderful idea for a business, but he doesn't have the tenacity to make it happen. He just talks this game and can't execute. So being able to do as you say and say as you do, make it happen is a key ingredient for being a successful entrepreneur. And you have tenacity despite failure. Because guess what? You're going to have failures. They may be little, they may be big. You're going to have failures. So you got to learn how to brush off your knees, stand up, and get right back into the game. Okay. So what do you think? Entrepreneurs are born, not made. True or false? You're gonna have to turn your mics on and kind of give me what's the consent. I can't see you guys, unfortunately. So I don't.
False.
False. Any trues?
False.
False. Anybody else? False is the correct answer, right? We would if entrepreneurs couldn't be trained or created, we wouldn't have all these classes available for entrepreneurship, right? Now, with that said, there are some characteristics that certainly will make people more likely to be successful as an entrepreneur. You got to be a moderate risk taker, not afraid to try something. You got to be a network, which means you got to be not afraid of meeting people because you're going to learn from your environment around you. You're very achievement motivated. You're alert to new opportunities. I like to say we have 2 ears, two nostrils, two eyes, and only one mouth. So we should be using all our senses around us to kind of figure out what's going on. What's the next opportunity? What problem could I solve out there? Be creative, decisive. You got to, you're not going to analyze something from here to Timbuktu and back again. At some point, you're going to get off the couch and make it happen. Energetic, have a really strong work ethic, and lengthy attention span. There's going to be a lot of details you're going to have to work through. You have an optimistic disposition. You're persuasive. You're a promoter. You're going to have to promote your business, right? Resource assembler, leverageur. Self-confident. A self-starter. Tenacious. You have a tolerance for ambiguity, for stuff you don't know. And you're a visionary. You're dreaming. You see the future. So those are traits that would make you a good entrepreneur. Can you learn some of those traits? Sure. But if they're inherently in your DNA, that's to your advantage. All right. Entrepreneurs are gamblers. What do you think? True or false?
True.
Anybody?
True, very true.
You say entrepreneurs are gamblers? Got a couple of trues? Any falses? So you're going to be surprised at this answer. It's false. Entrepreneurs are calculated risk takers, not gamblers. There's a big difference. You're not betting the farm. You're making calculated risks. And so you're not going to bet your house, for example, on this business thing. You're going to get a loan to do it or whatever. You calculate the amount of risk you're willing to take for that business. Virgin Airlines, you know Virgin Records or Virgin Airlines, when they started, there was a big record business that was behind that. And so when he started the company, he went to the banks and said, I don't want to risk the rest of my business. So we're going to set up a separate business to launch the airline division. And if this fails in 12 months, I get to return the airplanes. So he made sure that all his employees were safe and weren't going to go down if this airline was not successful. Calculated. All right. And we're back to that money question, right? Entrepreneurs are motivated primarily by money. What do you think? True or false?
False.
Yeah, false is by far the best answer. Certainly, ideally, you would like to make some money, but you got to take care of your customer and make sure you have the right product or service to facilitate the needs of your customer, and the money will follow. It's an old saying is if you take care of the pennies, the dollars will take care of themselves. There's some truth to that. So false is the right answer for that one. Here's a good one. Entrepreneurs should be young and energetic. What do you think?
False.
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 Why do you think that's false?
You don't need to be young. Energetic maybe, but you don't need to be young.
Okay. So what does somebody old like me maybe have that somebody young doesn't have?
Some wisdom. and
Experience, right? Wisdom. I've been there, scraped my knees multiple times, right? So that can actually be an advantage when I'm starting a business because I've been burnt before. I know how to work my way around it. So the answer is false. However, entrepreneurship is really big for young people. Young people are very much seeing that as a future opportunity. When I was at the University of Baltimore, I was always amazed when the students were lining up to picking their courses, and entrepreneurship was one of the key majors. And it was the parents that were having trouble when a student was selecting entrepreneurship as the major, because the parents would ask, well, what are you going to do when you graduate? I'm going to start a business. Well, yeah, but what job are you going to do? So when you become an entrepreneur or study entrepreneurship, you have the advantage of studying all business disciplines, right? You get expertise in accounting, you get a finance, you get a marketing, you get an exposure across distribution, the whole channel. Okay, so there are three types of entrepreneur companies out there. The first one is a salary substitution company, and that's basically the owner's similar level of income that they would be able to earn in a conventional job. Sometimes there's a lot of immigrants that come to our country that have been very well educated. Maybe they were a doctor in India and they come to the United States, but their doctorate doesn't transfer. So now they got to go get a job. So they start a cleaning business, right? They're kind of forced into it as a salary substitution firm. Lifestyle firms, people that have a passion for a sport, for example. I'm an avid cyclist, and I have a friend that owns a bike store. I can tell you he's not in that business to make money. He's not getting rich selling bicycles, but he loves it. He's passionate about it. So it helps support his hobby of cycling. He's got another job because he can't make enough money selling bikes to do it. And then there's the entrepreneurial firm. And these people tend to be a little bit different. These are companies that bring products and services to the market by creating and seizing opportunities. They've got your antenna up all the time, and you're looking for new opportunities that you can bring into the marketplace. So those are three types. My friend that opened up the the accountant that opened up the pizzeria was a salary substitution firm, and his pizzeria failed, by the way, because that was just not the right business for him. So after 6 months, and after he got robbed a couple times, his wife got held up with a shotgun at the cash register. He goes, "This is not the business for me." He eventually went back into accounting and started a tax accounting business. He was no longer a corporate accountant, but he set up his own tax business and had very successful business, but he had to kind of start from ground zero, right? He had no customers. All right. So young entrepreneurs, as I mentioned, the interest among young people in entrepreneurship careers is really high. According to a Harris Interactive poll, 40% of people 8 to 21 years old all said they like to start their own business someday. And I'll bet you many of you guys have actually been entrepreneurs and didn't even know it. Anybody done any babysitting? Get paid for doing some babysitting?
Yes.
That makes you an entrepreneur. Welcome to the club, right? Anybody cut grass for money? No? Yeah,
Shovel
if you did,
snow.
yeah. Shovel snow for money. There you go. You're an entrepreneur. You made money by providing a service. So a total of almost 60% of the 8 to 20-year-old people said they know someone who has started their own business. So it's kind of in our DNA as a nation. So one of the cool things that entrepreneurial firms, companies that start businesses, add a lot to society. They tend to be very innovative. So innovation is the process of creating something new, which is central to the entrepreneurial process. And several studies have found that small businesses outperform their larger counterparts in terms of obtaining patents. And one of the reasons is, as companies get big and kind of stodgy, they also kind of get complacent. Probably about 20 years ago, Wegmans came to Maryland. Wegmans is from upstate New York. They're out of the Rochester, New York areas where they came from. And for anybody that has shopped at Wegmans, it's kind of this conglomerate store. They've got everything there from pre-prepared meals and chefs working in there and variety beyond on every single product line. It's an experience. When my family moved from upstate New York to Maryland, my wife went into the local Safeway store and said, "There's no choices here." I mean, in Rochester, you could go into, there was 55 different cheeses. There was nothing here. But the cool thing is when a new innovative company, and they were new to this area, comes in, they push everybody else's buttons. And so the companies that have been getting complacent all of a sudden change their game. Safeway is not the same store it was 20 years ago, completely different. So entrepreneurs do that for the big companies as well. When they come up with a new idea, they force other businesses to kind of reevaluate as this new kid on the block comes in and starts rattling their cages and changing the game. So innovation breeds innovation. Job creation. Small businesses are the creators of most of the new jobs in the US and employ about half of the private sector employees. According to the Kauffman Foundation survey, 92% of Americans say entrepreneurs are critically important to job creation. They create the new opportunities. Okay, impact on society. They create new products and services, new ideas, new things come into the marketplace. And sometimes one business will create something which in turn forces entrepreneurs to create something else. Think about when a new Apple phone comes out. There's another entrepreneur somewhere that's figuring out, well, what else could go with that phone? Oh, maybe it needs a fancy case, or maybe it needs a different type of charger, something, a new cable. So there's spin-offs businesses that can come out of the creation of another business. Impact on larger firms, kind of what I mentioned earlier with the grocery store. Impact on larger firms as helps them grow and change. So the entrepreneurial process, how do I decide to become an entrepreneur? How do I get my uncle, who for the last 4 years has said, I got this great business idea, but can't make it happen? Well, the first step is really deciding on, yep, I'm going to do it. I'm going to become an entrepreneur. But the next step is more critically important. You've got to develop a successful business idea, a successful business idea. So as we're going to see in a minute, not all ideas are necessarily good business ideas, right? Sometimes other things have to happen in the marketplace before those ideas can be leveraged and turn into something. So before I got into academia, my last full-time position was with a company called Baltimore Air Coil Company that built evaporative cooling equipment, air conditioning equipment. And we had a research and development group, and we fed ideas in from marketing, from the research people. We called it the hopper approach. We had this big funnel of ideas that would come in, and we'd look at the ideas and see how long do we have the engineering ability to create the product or service? How long will it take us to bring it to market? And what's the return on our investment going to be? Is this going to be a successful thing? And sometimes we had an idea and we just stuck it on the shelf and said, nope, we're not, the market's not ready for that. Market's just not ready for that. So it has to be a good business idea. It's got to be able to make money. Step 3 is moving the idea to an entrepreneurial firm, and then finally managing and growing this entrepreneurial firm. Little side tidbit. Which came first, the iPhone or the iPad from Apple? Anybody know? The
iPhone.
iPad? Sorry, go ahead.
iPhone. Or iPad. Which one did you say?
Yeah, so the iPhone was released before the iPad, but the iPad was actually invented first. The iPad was what they had been designing, a tablet, and they had it all ready to go. And Jobs said, we need to go and compete with BlackBerry. We need to create a product. So I want you to take that iPad and shrink it down into a handheld device and put a phone in it. So they shelved the iPad, put it on the shelf, and put all their energy in the iPhone because they saw a bigger return on that initially, and then later on released the iPad. All right. So where do these ideas come from? Where do good ideas come from? How about this? This is a business opportunity. I love this. Jetpack to get to work. Well, think about that. You know, we can do that now with drones. There's no reason why we couldn't have a drone technology strapped to our back and get ourselves to work. But what are some of the problems with this? Well, safety might be one. And what would happen if we have 10,000 people all flying at the same time? I look at that and go, well, there's an entrepreneurial opportunity there. How are we going to control traffic? What does a traffic light look like in the sky, right? So for every problem, there could be an entrepreneurial opportunity. I still think this would be a cool way to get around. How about solar energy? Did you know that solar energy was invented in 1954? That's photoelectronics, where light shone into a semiconductor and it produces voltage. So David Chaplin, Calvin Fuller, and Gerald Pearson of Bell Labs are credited with creating the first photocell, basically. In other words, these are men that made the first device that converted sunlight into electrical power. They later pushed the conversion efficiency from 4 to 11% in 1954. 1954. Were there solar panels around in 1954? Did your grandparents have solar panels on their farm? Let me help you with that. The answer is no, right? Why? Well, for several reasons. One, energy was really cheap. Two, our electronics drew a huge amount of power. We had vacuum tube televisions and radios, and we ran 100-watt light bulbs, where today a light bulb is 2 or 3 watts to produce the same amount amount of energy. So we consumed a huge amount of energy, and it just wasn't practical or cost effective for photocells or solar panels, as you see them on roofs today, to be developed. They're there now, though, and that took a long time, right? We're talking of more than 60 years before the technology became viable for the marketplace. So sometimes it comes back to, sometimes it's a good idea, but sometimes other things have to happen to make that good idea viable. Okay, here's a good one for you guys. When was the first digital camera invented, and by which famous company? Anybody know who invented the digital camera? Anybody? It wasn't Apple.
Canon.
Couldn't.
Okay, it would be a good guess. They were certainly into photography, but no. Which is the oldest camera manufacturer in the United States? Anybody know?
It wasn't
might-
Kodak, was it?
Yes,
With the
sir. It
little-
was Kodak.
with the
Kodak.
little building, with the little building.
Kodak built the very first digital camera. But here's what you don't know. It was invented in 1975 in a lab in Rochester, New York. That's where the headquarters of Kodak is, right? 1975. That's what the camera looked like. It was, they called it portable. It was about the size of a toaster. Okay, invented in 1975. Kodak didn't commercialize it until 2001. That's a long time. It's 26 years. It sat in the back room at Kodak. Now, they patented it. Every time you and I buy a smartphone, Apple gets royalties for that. Kodak gets royalties for that. Every single, it's a small fraction of a penny, but every digital camera, Kodak gets royalties. Not enough as, they don't make as much money as they did if they sold cameras. And here's an interesting one, though. They licensed it in 1981, so that's 6 years, right, to Sony. So Sony released the first practical digital cameras. There were several reasons why Kodak didn't do this. What business was Kodak in? And it's a big company, right? What business was Kodak in back in the late 70s, early 80s? Hint, film. Film everything, not just photography, but cinematography, all your medical imagery, x-rays, every imagery that was done in the world was done on film, and Kodak was the world leader in film. So now they invented something that's digital that basically would cannibalize their own business. So you can imagine, all the different managers of the different groups were pretty not excited about this concept. Plus, in 1975, any idea what a computer looked like? We had black and white imagery. We didn't have the storage capabilities. I mean, he's got a cassette tape on the corner of his camera there to store it. He made really rough black and white imagery made of zeros and ones from the simple digital technology. There were no color printers. There was no way to make a good quality photograph. And Kodak was in the high quality imagery business. The marketplace wasn't ready. So they were smart to let somebody else fumble with it first and come back to it later. So again, sometimes an idea is just not ready to take to market. Other things have to happen before it becomes viable. So yeah, Kodak calls it exciting development, wrong approach. Oh, here's one of my favorite. Anybody have a pet rock as a kid? It's probably a little before your time, maybe. Anybody know what the pet rock is? Have any seen this before?
No.
Oh, this was great. This sold for $9.95. And this was developed by a guy and a couple of guys in the beach in California, had a couple of cocktails, and they were marketers. And they picked up a rock on the beach, and the guy said, yeah, I can market anything. He said, well, can you market this rock? And passed him to the rock and said, leave that with me. So they created the pet rock, and it's their cost to produce this was pretty small. They created a cardboard box. They put a nest in it. They put the rock in the box. And the best part is they created this 200-page operating manual, how to take care of your pet rock. And I'll admit, I had one as a kid. I had to share it with my brothers and sisters. So, is this kind of product sustainable? No, it's a fad product, but the kit sold in pet stores. It contained rock Nestor. Gary Dahl was the inventor. Went on sale in September 1975, so it was a long time ago. But in 1975, this fad lasted about 6 months, and they sold 1.5 million rocks. 1.5 million rocks. So sometimes the idea doesn't have to be revolutionary, doesn't even have to be high tech. And Mr. Dahl became a millionaire in 75, and that was a lot of money in 1975. It's like almost like becoming a billionaire today. All right, now I got some bad news for you. 8 out of 10 businesses will fail. 8 out of 10 businesses will fail. Reason number one, and this is pretty important. Most entrepreneurs are not in touch with their potential end user, the real customer. They don't talk to them deep enough. So they take it to family and friends and get feedback, and they're getting a lot of positive nods. But is somebody really going to spend any money on it? And how much money are they going to spend on this new contraption, whatever it happens to be? So there's no real differentiation in the marketplace. Is my mousetrap really better than the mousetrap that's on the market? And how much is somebody going to pay for the extra features? Are these features really benefits to that particular customer, right? So that could be a failure. Number 3, failure to communicate the value proposition in clear, concise, and compelling fashion. You get all caught up in your own technology and can't tell anybody why those features are benefits to them. My late father's definition of a smartphone was not even close to anything that a smartphone was on the market. He was an old man, right? So there were 4 things he wanted on a phone that he would call it a smartphone. Loud amplified sound, great big buttons that were pre-programmed with his kids' pictures on it so he could push the button and make the phone call, right? And all he wanted to do was make phone calls with it. If you told him that it searched the internet, his eyes would glaze over and go, don't need that, it's too complicated. So again, features have to be benefits to whom you're talking to, right? Pretty important. Features for the sake of features won't sell any product. Leadership breakdown at the top. Yes, founder dysfunction. So typically, particular companies that start up with multiple owners, 2 or 3 partners, as the company starts to grow, often the owners have different motivations. One wants to sit at the beach, one wants to make the company bigger, and that can get into some challenges. So leadership breakdown at the top happens a lot. And the inability to nail a profitable business model. How are you going to make money, right? That's usually a big question, but not always. One of my favorite ones was when Facebook came out 20 years ago. They had no idea what their money, where their money was coming from. It was a free app that people downloaded on their phone, right? But they hadn't figured out how to monetize it. But they were doing one thing. By the way, I did buy some Facebook stock when it first came out. I think about 30 shares or something, and at $36 a share. I think it's now 300 and some odd dollars a share. I sold it a long time ago. But my point is, the revenue model hadn't been well thought out. It turns out they were collecting data on the people, and their revenue model was selling information about you and I that we gave up freely at the front end, right? But when the product came out, they hadn't thought that through yet. And yet they were getting people to invest in the company early on. That's almost an exception to the rule. Generally, you need to figure out how you're going to get paid. And if you haven't got that nailed down, that's a problem. Here's another failure. Most people didn't know that Bill Gates failed with one of his businesses. It was called the Trafodata. It was a computerized machine for processing paper tapes from traffic counters. It went nowhere fast. Obviously, he picked himself up and carried on to become one of the richest men in the world. Sony, Akiyamura, and rice cookers, right? The Japanese eat a lot of rice, so he created an electric rice cooker early on. But basically, it burnt the rice that it cooked, and ultimately fewer than 100 of these rice cookers were actually sold. Needless to say, that one got pulled out of the market. This is one of my favorite, Kentucky Fried Chicken. The Colonel Sanders. He didn't make his first real money until he was 65 years of age. And talking about tenacity, early on, he wasn't looking at opening restaurants, but he had a recipe for chicken, and he was trying to get restaurants just to carry his recipe. He got over 1,000 no's. You need a lot of tenacity to keep pushing on when somebody says no to your idea 1,000 times before you got somebody to work with him. Henry Ford's first car company was a total disaster, absolute disaster. It was called the Detroit Automobile Company, not Ford, the Detroit Automobile Company. And back in the early 1900s, cars were made one at a time. They were handmade, and parts were not necessarily interchangeable. I couldn't take a wheel off that car and put it on that car and expect it to fit. Eli Whitney and the cotton gin was the guy that came up with the concept of interchangeable parts. So although Henry's company failed, it was very competitive, cars were very expensive, and no interchangeability of parts, he figured something out. He figured that the car companies were not catering to the average person. So as we know, the Ford Motor Company's mission was to create a car that every one of his workers and the average person could afford, a car that would sell for a few $100. In order to do that, he had to make one vehicle, one way with interchangeable parts. So the early Model Ts came in black. You could have any color you want as long as it was black. Here's a paintbrush if you want to change the color. And he was able to mass produce vehicles, the first manufacturer to do things in volume. And he catered to a different market than all the other car companies were catering to. Instead of going after the luxury buyer, he went after the average Joe. And there was no looking back, right? Okay. So how do you ensure that you don't fail as an entrepreneur? Well, I'd like to say you can, but you really can't. However, there are a few things you can do to help ensure success, or at least minimize failure. The first one, and the most important one, is really research your idea thoroughly. And that means you got to make sure it's a good business opportunity. You got to look realistically at the revenue potential. Who are you going to sell your product to? And don't say everybody. You need to find a niche that you can own, especially if you've got a commodity kind of segment or you've got something that's a little different. Let's pick one for a second. Let's say you're coming out with a new tea, right? You're coming up with a new tea. Well, the market is saturated with teas, but your tea is all natural and you sell it in a glass jar. That's different. So the packaging is recyclable and you put a metal lid on it that's recyclable. Put a little slogan inside the lid and we'll call this tea Snapple Tea, right? Well, Snapple Tea launched in New York State. Well, there was no way they were going to get into the grocery stores. Absolutely no way. So this tea was made from all natural ingredients, where the other teas were not necessarily. There were a lot of artificial flavors and artificial sweeteners put in them. And so in order to get shelf space, if you went into Wegmans or any of the big grocery stores, they got laughed because Kodak and, Kodak, Coca-Cola and Pepsi basically own the store shelves for drinks, all drinks. So how are you going to get in there? Well, the secret was to find a customer niche that wasn't really well served by the big soda manufacturers. And that in the New York City area, those were sandwich shops, delicatessens, particularly Jewish delicatessens. And yes, Coke was sold there, but they only sold a few bottles. It wasn't what they were looking for. They were looking for restocking Wegmans and Walmart and the big players. They really didn't care about the small sandwich shops. So Snapple went to these guys and said, I'll give you an extra 5% margin if you carry my tea. And they stayed off the radar screen of the big soda players, because the big soda players could have crushed them and put them out of business in a minute, right? But they didn't. They found a niche and they owned that niche, the small business. And obviously the tea is a scalable business. So they drew a little circle and said, this is the customer base I'm going to go after, the small sandwich shops. And then you draw the next one, next size up business, and keep going. So they're growing in a market segment where they own a small segment that are not being well taken care of by other players. And that's really how you find success. Another quick story of one of my friends many, many years ago, but 25 years ago, I started my life in the catalog business, industrial catalog business. But I have a friend that whose daughter was in sports, and the high school sports for women was horrible in terms of how it was serviced and the money in it compared to, say, men's football. And they're trying to get the uniforms and shoes and stuff was really, really difficult. So this guy said, you know what? I'm going to put a catalog together and I'm going to mail it just to the female athletic directors at all the high schools in the United States. He built a $6 million business just by catering to female sports. And he didn't create a new product. He was just reselling existing products. He found a niche that was not well served, and he grew it into a great business opportunity. Everybody knows Under Armour, right? Kevin Plank and Under Armour. He started at the University of Maryland. You may not know what his first product was he sold. You know what his first product was when he was a student at University of Maryland? Anybody know what he sold? I'll give you a hint. It was seed money for his next business. He discovered an interesting problem. He couldn't buy flowers at Valentine's Day on campus. So he set up a business selling flowers on campus at the University of Maryland. That was his initial seed money. And he was a football player, right? And he did not like the way the jersey stuck to him, his skin when he perspired. So he said, there's got to be something better. And he found women's blouse material had a wicking approach to it. It would pull the perspiration from his body. So he created a shirt, hence the term Under Armour. I think his first thing might have been underwear, but underwater, right? Under Armour, that's where it came from. It was a shirt to wick the perspiration away from his shirt. Now he had no brand, right? And you know that Nike or Puma or Adidas or any of the big sports players, if they got wind of what he was doing, would have crushed him in a minute. But again, he picked a niche market. He went after high school football teams first. That was where he went. Not even colleges. Eventually went after colleges, but he started at the high school level, off the radar screen of the big players to get some traction, to get some revenue. And then he started drawing circles and expanding and then adding product to serve that segment. That's how he scaled. Very smart. Okay. So when you have an idea, you got to bounce it. Now, this one I'm going to say with caution, but family and friends. Most of your family and friends are not going to call your baby ugly, even if it is. All right? You need candid feedback. You need to know the good, the bad, and the ugly about your product or service so you can improve it. You got to listen to the feedback. Sometimes your family and friends are just not going to be as candid as they need to be. So you need to also have focus groups. Bring people together that you don't know and show them your product concept or idea to get feedback. And you also got to ask them how much they're going to pay. What would you pay for this idea early on? Get a feel of what the market price is going to be, because pricing's a whole other game, but most people go, okay, it cost me $10 to make, so if I double it, I make a 50% gross margin, I'll sell it for $20. Okay, but what if the market would accept it for $99? Which is the better price for you? $99, because you're gonna make a lot more money. So you need to understand where the product will fit in the marketplace and how much you can get paid for it. And you got to make sure that you're going to make enough gross margin on it that you can sustain yourself, right? All right. Random sampling groups, standing out on the street and say, have you seen my new gadget? Here's what it does. What do you think of this? Get feedback. You need a lot of feedback. And obviously, if you can find potential users, if you got a product that's being used in a business, take it into the business and get them to try it, see what they think of it. Stephen Covey says that most people do not listen with the intent to understand, they listen with the intent to reply. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have 2 noses, 2 nostrils, 2 eyes, 2 ears, and only 1 mouth. We should be speaking half as much as we are observing and absorbing our surroundings. And that's how we learn what the customer really wants. And then we can provide them a solution that fits their needs. So remember, as I said, entrepreneurs don't make product, they provide solutions to problems. And it's our job as an entrepreneur to understand what the problem is and figure out a way to solve it. So evaluate your current and potential competition. Now imagine if you wanted to sell sandwiches. So, all right, all the big players are out there. My fake Starbucks sign that I got there, dumb Starbucks. It's not a real company, obviously. But McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, Burger King, Tim Hortons, which is a Canadian brand. It's actually a U.S. brand now, but it's only in the upstate, so close to the border, because Tim Hortons was a hockey player. Nobody knows who they are down here. Jimmy Dean, croissant sandwiches. So these are all competitors to my local sandwich shop, but I could also buy at local gas stations, right? But another competitor would be my sandwich at home, right? How much am I going to spend for a sandwich if I can make it at home or not? So when you're looking at your competition, you have to look at the direct competitors, the people that would compete with you directly on a retail level, but also the indirect ones, the ones that may or may not be right in your face, but could be a substitute for your product. For those of you that don't know what this is, these are drills. The one on the top left corner is an old mechanical drill that your great-grandfather would have had in his toolbox. And the one down below is a cord-powered AC drill that your dad would have had, and I would have a battery-operated version of the same thing. What's the purpose of a drill? This is a trick question. What do you think the purpose of a drill is? What does a drill do? Anybody?
Makes a hole into something.
Makes a hole, right? Makes a hole. You know what? There's other ways to make a hole too, depending what the material is. I have a screwdriver and a hammer. If I need to hang a picture on the wall with a wall plug, I'll just take my screwdriver, tap it with my hammer, and I've got a hole. I just made that's a substitute tool. I can make a hole with something else. So is that a direct competitor? No, but it's an indirect competitor. And so I need to know the other ways to do it. Think about coffee. I talked about the sandwiches a minute ago, but think about coffee. Where can I get a cup of coffee? Well, I can get it from my Keurig at home. I can get it from my percolator at home. I can get it from my brew pot at home. I can get it from all the name brands, Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts and all those key players. I can get it from McDonald's, but I can also get it from Wawa and any of the gas stations around town, right? Those are all potential competitors for that cup of coffee. So where am I going to get it, and why am I going to go there to get it? One more little story on coffee while we've got you. Anybody know how Starbucks got started? What was their change of the game? You could buy a cup of coffee for $1 from everybody anywhere. It was $1 when they kind of got started. They started selling coffee for $5 a cup. How'd they do that? Anybody know?
I remember, didn't they create the ambiance of the Italian cafes?
You're the man.
And you felt
that's exactly
rich.
right. Exactly right. They set up, the first stores were in Seattle, and they set up coffee beans, bags of coffee beans to get the aroma in the store. The idea was come in, sit down, have a cup of Java. We've got some baked goods in here. Take your time. We're going to charge you $5 for a cup of coffee, but take your time. It wasn't instant go, which they migrated to later. And that was a game changer in the coffee world, right? Because everybody was get a cup of coffee, run, go, go, go. It was sit, take a load off, and this is even before the internet. So you didn't have your you couldn't go on the Wi-Fi or do anything else. You just literally went in to enjoy company and have a cup of coffee. It was a game changer. But they pushed the envelope. The value proposition was I wasn't buying a cup of coffee. I was buying a coffee experience. I was buying the ambiance of the experience. They changed the game completely. All right. So as an entrepreneur, one of the very first things you got to create is what we call an elevator pitch. That means when I introduce myself to you, the first thing you're going to give me is kind of a 1 minute to 2 minute overview of what your business is and why it's so great. What problem, or better yet, what problem is it going to solve for whomever I'm talking to? It's your infomercial. I can't play for more than a couple minutes. And it allows you to test the idea of whatever you're coming up with, even though you may not have the business yet, right? You test the idea with people that you first meet, and if their eyes glaze over, well, that might tell you something, but if they show excitement, that tells you something else again, right? So that's why the elevator pitch is pretty important. Your pitch will morph and change as you test the waters with your concept, right? Okay, and then the next thing you're going to do is create a business plan. You need a game plan in terms of how I'm going to move this business forward. And the very first thing at the top here is the executive summary, which is the very last thing that you do in your business plan. So I'm going to come back to that. But you got to come up with the name of the business, come up with the problem that you're trying to solve, and what unmet needs there are that your product or service are going to take care of. The solution and how the business fulfills the needs. What does the business model look like? In other words, how do I sell this product? How does it go to market? Do I just sell on the internet? Do I set up a distribution network? Are they resellers? Do I sell out of the trunk of my car? How does it work? And then where does the product come from? Am I making it in my basement? Am I buying them out of China? Am I opening up a manufacturing plant? How does that all work? I got to do a market analysis. I need to know how big the market is and who my target audience is going to be. Everybody might have money, but maybe there's a segment that is the right segment for me to sell my product. And then what does my promotional sales look like? How do I sell it? As I said, how do I promote it? Is it just on social media? Do I do billboards? Do I have skywriters in the airplane? What do I do? Who's my competition? As we talked about, the direct and indirect competition. And then what makes me qualified for this business, and perhaps my team players that have gone on it. I got to come up with at least a 12-month, ideally a 5-year sales projection, which is going to be a little bit like opening the window, putting your finger out and seeing which way the wind is blowing, but you've got to try to make an educated guess in terms of how I'm going to grow this business, which obviously will impact what the business model looks like in terms of feeding it, right? And then what kind of startup money do I need to get this thing from ground zero to go? All right. And so the business plan is not etched in stone. Stuff is going to happen fairly early on that will change your direction. Expect to pivot, expect to change. The marketplace is going to tell you a lot about your product. So your entire product might change, but I can guarantee the segment of who your customer is going to change for sure. Almost guaranteed. Almost guaranteed. Yeah. Before COVID, there was a coffee shop, which I was on the board of directors for. It was a small startup, a former University of Baltimore student started this company. And it was called Cups Coffee House. And Cups stood for Creating Unlimited Possibilities. The purpose of this business was to help disenfranchised youth learn life skills. That was the purpose. To create baristas or short order cooks that could go then work for another business somewhere else. So it was almost like an educational thing. So they started this business and they set it up on oh, sorry, I can't remember the area, but in a rougher part of Baltimore, not far from the University of Maryland Hospital, on the other side of the road, just the wrong side of Martin Luther King Highway as you're coming into Baltimore, right? So the first problem they had is they had no traffic. Location, location, location. Location sucked. It was a good place to find potential students to go in, right? But not to sell coffee. And one day, somebody accidentally came across the street from the hospital or the university, one of the two, and asked if they could cater lunch. And I went, sure, we can make sandwiches. And all of a sudden, a little light bulb went on and said, well, if the customers won't come to us, maybe we need to go to them. And they pivoted the business from a sit and serve coffee shop to a catering business, which worked really, really well until COVID hit. And then the wheels came off the train. And unfortunately, the business went bankrupt and had to close. But for a short period of time, they were really rocking as a result of the pivot to a different clientele. All right. So when you have your business plan, you're going to make an oral presentation then to potential investors, people that are you want to put money into your business. Maybe it's a pitch competition for CCBC, right? You're going to pitch. Now I said 15 minutes. Sometimes it's only 4 or 5 minutes, but the first rule of making an oral presentation is to follow whatever the directions are. If you're told you have 50 minutes, don't talk more than the allotted time. So if you got 4 minutes, it's 4 minutes. Stay in it. The presentation should be smooth and really well rehearsed. The slide should be sharp and not cluttered, and you need to leave some time for questions and feedback that you expect to get from whoever's going to invest in the business, or if it's just winning the prize. So the smart entrepreneur has a good idea of the kinds of questions that'll be asked and will prepare answers ahead of time, right? Okay. So again, here's a typical business plan presentation overview. I won't bore you with all the details, but you get the idea. Title slide. Oh, and the only other comment I said at the very first line on the outline for a business plan was executive summary. The executive summary is the very last thing you do on your business plan, and it's a summary of all the sections in your business plan, and it's used by the people that might be interested in your business. So if I'm a financial investor, I want to go look at your finances. So I'm going to see a quick couple of words about how you're going to make money. And if that intrigues me, then I'll open up the plan and go to the section in the business plan that talks in more detail. So it's just a summary snapshot of the various poignant points of your plan. Okay. And then you got to come up with a list of asks. What do you need for money to get your business off? And if you're looking for investment and you're not going to bootstrap it, and bootstrapping means you're just going to spend your own money. If you're looking for somebody to invest in your business, you got to highlight what financing you need. And typically you can do this for up to 90 days to run your business. So everything you need to get your business going for up to 90 days. So this is a hot dog business. He needs $3,300 to get him up and going and running for the first 90 days. So he's got, business licenses, the hot dog cart, which is obviously the biggest one, the initial inventory of hot dogs and buns and so forth, which I won't bore you with the details, but eventually that becomes a variable expense and not a fixed expense. So right now you get enough to get you going. That's what he would need to get his business going. And there you go. That's a quick fly through of how to get your business going and how to stay successful. Comments, thoughts, questions? Any of you guys entrepreneurs? I'm very quiet. Anybody?
I was making strawberry covered chocolate strawberries.
Oh, now I'm hungry. How are you going to market with those?
Well, I actually did that for Valentine's Day, and I had so many orders that I had to take off work in advance because I had probably like 40 orders, and I had to make them all the same day. So it was so stressful.
Very cool. You should pitch at CCBC with that business idea.
Chocolate covered strawberries?
Yeah. So it could be a confectionery business, right? All of a sudden you could have something here.
Yeah, this is a button.
Huh? There you go.
But
it could grow into something.
Oh, yeah.
So
You just
yeah.
got call my phone. Let me see if it's
So
Wait, what?
I'm sorry?
What was that?
We got multiple people talking here. So that could be a business. It'd be worth looking into. Tasty fruit treats, because you don't have stuff to do strawberries. You could do bananas. You could do blueberries. You could do different dipping sauces instead of just chocolate. You could do other things. So there's a lot of fun you could have with that. Creating a confectionery business using fruit as your primary source. Throwing it out as an idea.
Thank you
Anybody
so
else?
much, Frank. Anybody else want to share anything? I know we have a few people, entrepreneurs. They're a quiet bunch tonight.
Yeah, I have. I'm trying to launch a software app now. It's really a software platform. I'm a pastor, and it's basically a spiritual wellness app with 6 virtual assistants. And I almost have the MVP ready to roll. We're trying to get through the Apple Store now, And
How are you going to get paid? By the way, my wife's a
Yeah.
pastor, so
Awesome.
I'm kind of familiar
And
with where you're going here. So what's your revenue stream? How are you going to make money?
so we're trying to launch it with the whole product free for 30 days, and then there's an upsell to $9.99 a month. It's really 6-in-1. That's the problem I have. It's kind of like using chat, except we hard coded all of the pastoral guidance. So, I have a presentation. I'm scared. I need help. My vice is kind of get me, I need some guidance, prayer, encouragement, etc. That's one of the apps. Another is a full online school. Another is an executive planner that's in there. Another is just a daily devotional. And one is a multimedia platform, song, video. And the last is crisis support for addiction recovery and some other tools built into crisis support, which is the only one I can probably will ever get funding for. So I may have to split this out. I'm not sure.
Now they're all interesting ideas. And they could be good business ideas. You're gonna have to sweat the details on the revenue stream. How am I going to make money out of this? How do I get paid consistently? How many of these units do I have to sell each month to cover my fixed expenses? In other words, I'll break even. So very simple, quickie math to do that. But maybe you're going to apply for the Elite 10 program next year. CCBC. Delise can help you with that. Very good. Anybody else?